إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد, to proceed, the best of speech is the speech of Allah Azza wa Jal, and the best of guidance is the guidance of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and the worst of all affairs are those affairs that have newly been added into the religion. Every newly added affair in the religion is an innovation, and every innovation is a misguidance, and every misguidance is in the fire of hell. We ask Allah to protect us from innovations, misguidance, and the fire of hell. By the praise of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, we continue tonight with our reading and commentary on the treatise known as Usul by Imam Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal alayhi rahmatullah. In our previous discussions, we had covered some of the points relating to the statement of Imam Ahmad, وَالسَّمْعُ وَالطَّاعَةُ لِلْأَئِمَّةِ وأمير المؤمنين البر والفاجر ومن ولي الخلافة واجتمع الناس عليه ورضوا به ومن عليهم بالسيف حتى صار خليفة وسمي أمير المؤمنين. And to listen and obey to the Imams and to the commander of the believers, the righteous and the wretched, and whoever takes possession of the Khilafah, assumes leadership, and people unite around him and accept him, and whoever overcomes them with the sword until he becomes the Khalifa and is named the commander of the believers, named the leader. After Imam Ahmad mentioned these points, the importance of listening and obeying, irrespective of whether he is righteous or he is from the sinful, yani the leader, regardless of whether he is someone the people are pleased with and they love, or someone that overcame them with his power, with his sword, with his weapons, by force, so long as the word is now unanimous that he is the leader, whether people have chosen him or he forced himself upon them, then the rule becomes to listen and to obey. After mentioning this, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned some things that are unique to the Imam. Unique in two things. Number one, that they are his duties. They are his duties. And unique in that they are his rights. They are his duties and they are his rights. Additionally, if the Imam is missing, it is very likely that all of these things will be abandoned. They will be abandoned. The Muslimin will not be able to uphold these very important things. The first one he mentioned, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, وَالْغَزْوُ مَاضٍ مَعَ الْأُمَرَاءِ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ الْبَرْ وَالْفَاجِرْ لَا يُتْرَكْ. And going to war continues alongside, under the banner of the leaders, all the way until the day of judgment. The righteous and the wretched, yani from the leaders. It is not to be abandoned. In this statement that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala establishes a number of things. Number one, jihad has to be under the banner of a leader. There's no such thing as jihad as an individual decision or the decision of a subgroup amongst the Muslimin. There is no such thing. Jihad has to be under the banner of the general leader of the Muslimin. In fact, this was always the case with jihad, even in previous nations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us how Banu Israel said to a prophet of theirs, "Ib'ath lana malikan nuqatil fi sabilillah." Send forth for us a king, such that we will fight in the cause of Allah. Jihad is not an individual decision. Jihad is a decision of the leaders of the ummah after they survey the available resources and decide how and when and where to wage al-jihad, to wage war. War is not an individual decision. And likewise, just as it is not an individual decision, once they declare it, whether they are sinful or they are righteous, it becomes an obligation upon those who are called forth to answer the call. Once the call to jihad is made by the leaders of the Muslimin, the call must be answered. If anyone is summoned to join the ranks, they have to answer, each according to their country. So a Muslim from, for example, I'm just giving examples here, from Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia was to declare war and to summon and draft all young men of fighting age, then every Saudi person must answer that call, unless they are given exemption by their leadership. If the UAE did this, then every person from that country would have to answer the call. If Egypt did this, then every person from that country would have to do that as well, and so on and so forth, each according to their country. And there is no excuse for a Muslim to refuse to answer this call. And in fact, they would be committing treachery to their ummah and treachery to their deen to refuse to answer the call. And jihad is categorized by the scholars of the ummah into two broad categories. One is known as jihad al-daf' and the other is known as jihad al-talab. In English, perhaps we can translate these two as jihad al-daf'i being jihad of defense, and jihad al-talab as jihad of offense. One is offensive in nature, in which the Muslimin decide to attack first, and one is defensive in nature, in which the Muslimin have to repel an attack that was leveled against them by their enemies. And the rulings differ slightly between the two, such that jihad al-talab, where it's offensive in nature, and the Muslimin initiate it, is the exclusive domain of the leaders of the Muslimin. There is no faction, no group, no sect, no jama'ah, no individual who has a right to ignite such a type of war against the enemies of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, even if they happen to be idol worshippers, they happen to be kuffar, they happen to be the worst of the worst. No one has the right to drag the Muslimin into a war that their leaders, that their leadership, that their government has not initiated. And whoever does so, they have crossed the boundary and trespassed on the rights of the leaders of the Muslimin. And if anything comes back to harm the Muslimin from this type of premature ignition of war, igniting a war, then the sin is squarely on the shoulders of these people who rushed and hastened war to the Muslimin before they were ready, before their governments were ready for it, and so on and so forth. This is from the most severe of crimes that a Muslim can commit. And today, many of us have seen with our own eyes, if not even tasted, the bitter fruits of circumventing our leaders, going behind their backs and initiating wide-scale action against the enemies of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala without any consultation with the leaders of the Ummah, without alerting them regarding what you are up to, and catching everyone off guard and by surprise. We have all seen and tasted the bitter fruits of such solo action and what it brings in terms of harm to the Muslimin. The examples are very, very recent. The other type of jihad is jihad al-dafa', jihad in self-defense. This type of jihad is also further categorized into two categories. One of these categories is when the Muslimin have the capacity and the ability to repel their enemy. When they have the capacity and the ability to repel their enemy. And in that case, it is obligatory upon them to fight fi sabilillah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. And to keep fighting until they repel their enemy. And Allah Azza wa Jal pushes off the offender, pushes off the attackers, and saves the Muslimin from their harms. They must fight to save their deen, to save their honor, to save their family, their children, their women, and their land. And likewise, save their wealth. This is an obligation. And in the case of the jihad of ad-dafa', defensive jihad, no one has an excuse to remain back from all the men who are capable of fighting. Unlike jihad al-talab, where the Imam of the Muslimin may decide to pick and choose how many he wants to enlist and leave others unenlisted. He will draft some and leave some. Jihad al-dafa' is different. Everyone must answer the call to arms until the threat of the enemy has been neutralized. So this is one category, when we have the ability to repel the enemies. The second category is when we do not have the ability to repel the enemy. And if we keep fighting, the end result is to be crushed, to be decimated, to be destroyed. The longer we fight, the more they will crush us. The longer we fight, the more they will infiltrate. The more we fight, the more they will cordon and usurp our property. The more we fight, the more they will destroy our infrastructure and seize our assets, our land, our property, our factories, etc. In this case, it is upon the Muslimin to figure out how to reach a truce. They have to negotiate with the kuffar and reach a truce, reach an agreement to cease fire and negotiate a settlement. Because preserving the lives of the Muslimin is the number one priority. So the enemy that is attacking you, and you recognize that you do not have the ability to meet them toe-to-toe, head-to-head, and to repel them, and that the longer you fight, the more bloodshed will occur amongst the Muslimin, then in that case, you give the enemies something they want in exchange for sparing the lives of the Muslimin. The Muslimin are precious. We don't just keep fighting for ego. We don't just keep fighting for accolades, for saying that we are brave. This is not the fighting of the Muslimin. The fighting of the Muslimin is based upon what pleases Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. It does not please Allah to keep fighting until Islam is completely obliterated from the face of the earth in that one particular spot where all the Muslimin are killed. All the women are taken into captivity as hostages. All the children are taken by the kuffar, and so on and so forth. This is not pleasing to Allah Jalla wa ala. What is pleasing to Allah is to reach a truce. And the evidence for all these types of jihad is plentiful in the Sunnah. Now, with regards to jihad al-dafa', there's something else that we should mention, and that is sometimes it is permissible to initiate jihad al-dafa' even in the absence of the authorization of the leadership. An example of this is when there is no leadership present in that particular land for any reason, or the leadership is present but they are too busy dealing with other problems, putting out different kinds of fires. Maybe they are dealing with internal issues or revolt, etc., etc. And so the enemies take advantage of the unrest and the tumult, and they attack the Muslimin. It is upon the Muslimin then to initiate jihad al-dafa', again based upon that principle. Are they capable of repelling the enemy? And if not, then it is upon them to sit down with the enemy and negotiate a peace treaty, even if they have to forego something that was previously theirs in order to save the lives of the Muslimin. And today this is also something that we see is missing, especially when it comes to young, to uneducated, and to the zealots who follow particular ideologies and methodologies that are far removed from the Sunnah and the way of the jurists and the fuqaha of the Ummah. You see them fighting to the last breath, subjecting the women and the children to decimation, subjecting their people in mass to starvation because they do not know the rules of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala regarding the basics of jihad. What I'm talking about here is really the basics of jihad, like Jihad 101. We're not even like studying a chapter on jihad from one of the books of hadith or anything of that nature. Just a few common sense statements found in the books of the scholars. Now, from the ahadith is that which is narrated in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us about the affairs of the ends of time. And from these affairs, after Isa alayhi salatu wassalam kills al-Masih al-Dajjal, Ya'juj and Ma'juj emerge, Gog and Magog. And Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala reveals to Isa, إِنِّي قَدْ أَخْرَجْتُ عِبَادًا لِي لَا يَدَانِ لِأَحَدٍ بِقِتَالِهِمْ فَحَرِّزْ عِبَادِي إِلَى الطُّورِ. Indeed, I have allowed slaves of mine to emerge. I've caused them to emerge, caused them to come out, that no one has the ability to fight off. So secure my slaves in At-Tur. At-Tur is the famous mountain. In this hadith, Isa ibn Maryam, who is a prophet, is told to secure the believers, the best of mankind, walking on the face of the earth at that time, most righteous people, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that Isa will wipe their faces and reveal to them what Allah has prepared for them in Jannah. They have places already designated for them in Jannah. They're believing men of the highest caliber. They fought off Ad-Dajjal and his armies. Yet, Allah Azza wa Jal is making it clear, you have no ability to fight them. In other words, if you fight them, what would happen? This is a question I'm posing based upon this hadith. If Isa ibn Maryam and the believers heard this and they understood from Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala that they don't have the capacity to fight these enemies, meaning Gog and Magog, what would happen if they tried to fight? If they attempted to fight anyways against Gog and Magog, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, what would happen? أحسنتم 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 ما شاء الله. طيب. All of those who answered and they said that great harm would ensue, they would be defeated, they would suffer great loss, bloodshed, they will have disobeyed Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. All of these answers are correct. Many other harms will come because of this, and there's no benefit in it. This teaches us clearly, this hadith is just one example, but it teaches us clearly that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala does not desire for the Muslimin to just kind of throw themselves in the face of the enemies and wait to be killed after the last one of them. In fact, the enemies would love this. The enemies of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala would love this. To meet you on a battlefield where you are bare-chested, you have nothing to defend yourself, no armor, no weaponry, no nothing, maybe some primitive things like some daggers and some rocks. And they are equipped with the latest generation of machine guns and laser-guided bombs and so on and so forth. And you are standing in defiance, saying, kill me if you dare. They would love this. Because then they're saying, we have to defend ourselves. They're coming at us with their daggers. And if we stand still, they're going to stab us. So we're going to spray them with bullets. The enemies would love this. It does not please Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala in the least for the Muslimin to subject themselves to complete decimation. This has nothing to do with Islam. What pleases Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is to preserve the lives of the Muslimin. And as such, those who have preceded us in righteousness and piety, they used to hate it if an Imam led war and was not cautious over the loss of lives amongst the ranks of the Muslimin. And they would rank such an Imam as unfit to lead the jihad. And sometimes a leader of jihad would be removed and another would be put in his place because of his inability to manage the war correctly, where he puts the Muslimin in great danger and causes great loss of life in their ranks. The preservation of Muslim life is a priority. And such was the jihad of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and such was the jihad of the Sahaba. May Allah be pleased with all of them. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had an opportunity to fight to the last breath. Him and the Sahaba and everyone would die. During which battle? Which battle did the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions have the opportunity to fight to the last breath? All of them. To the point that they can all secure a shahada. Al-Khandaq. Ahsantum. The battle of the ditch, also known as Al-Ahzab. Allahu Akbar. Allah Azza wa Jal revealed an entire surah about this, praising the believers, praising Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam for something that today's Muslims would look back and say this is cowardice, because many of today's Muslims have not studied the fiqh, have no understanding of what pleases Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala and what displeases Him. They don't understand what jihad is and what is the purpose behind it. They think that jihad is heroics, that jihad is pomp, that jihad is going out with a splash. This is not jihad. Jihad is for the word of Allah to reign supreme. If the Muslims are humiliated, decimated, killed in mass, how does the word of Allah reign supreme? But such is the intellect of many people that today are at the forefront, and they are speaking to the crowds, and the crowds are listening to them, thinking that these heroics equate with taqwa, knowledge, and closeness to Allah. In the battle of Al-Khandaq, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his companions, they dug a ditch around the side of Medina that was exposed. A ditch so deep that the kuffar would not be able to bridge it, not be able to go through it and come out, not be able to perhaps fill it by putting stuff and dumping things into it. the only way was to expose themselves to being killed if they want to cross the ditch. So the Sahaba defended the ditch tooth and nail. And so they repelled a tremendous army that was coming to kill them by simply not fighting, by refusing to engage, by telling the kuffar, if you come too close, we'll kill you. Otherwise, we're not going to do anything. And such was the victory of Al-Khandaq. The kuffar eventually got too tired from laying siege to Medina, and they departed by the praise of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and the tides turned in favor of the Muslimin. This is what happens when the Muslimin think strategically, when they have far-sightedness, when they follow the guidelines and the rulings of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and they think ahead, and they value that which Allah has placed value on, such as sparing the lives of the women and the children and those that are sacred to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So these are just some of the evidences showing how the preservation of life comes first. Even if the Muslimin have to enter into a treaty, peace treaty or a truce with the kuffar, they should, to preserve the lives of the Muslimin. So with jihad al-dafa', if it happens to be that there is no leader to initiate jihad al-dafa' and the Muslimin have the ability to repel their enemies, they should do so. Or there is no leader to initiate negotiations with the kuffar to reach an agreement and a truce and a deal to negotiate, then the Muslimin should come together and push forth their leaders and their elders and their wise men to sit down with their enemies and negotiate. One last thing I want to mention is history repeats itself. How many times has it happened in the past that ego has caused the loss of lives of millions of Muslims? When bravado is presented as jihad and courage, and it incurs the wrath of an enemy that is far superior in terms of preparation, strength, and armament. In fact, the Mughals and the destruction that befell the Muslimin at their hands, that entire chapter of sad history, so sad that some of the historians of Islam said, I wish that my mother never gave birth to me and that I wouldn't have to write these words. That chapter was begun by an act of arrogance committed by some of the Muslimin. That sad chapter where the Mughals were enraged and they launched a siege against the Muslim empire. And millions upon millions upon millions of Muslimin were killed in many, many battles, such that sometimes in a single day, 1 million Muslims would be killed, such as on the day of the fall of Baghdad. All of that was begun by an act of arrogance on the part of the Muslimin. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to grant us wisdom and to grant this ummah the insight and the wisdom and the knowledge to learn from the mistakes of those before them, and that Allah Azza wa Jalla lead us back to guidance and supremacy. Innahu ala kulli shay'in qadir. Imam Ahmad, after mentioning the issue of al-jihad, he moves on. He said, وَقِسْمَةُ الْفَيْءِ وَإِقَامَةُ الْحُدُودِ إلى الأئمة ماضٍ ليس لأحد أن يطعن عليهم ولا ينازعهم. And the distribution of the fay'. Al-fay' is part of the income of the government of the Muslimin, that sometimes comes from the spoils of war. وإقامة الحدود, and the establishment of the hudud, the legislated punishments, such as the capital punishment of murder, such as the stoning of the adulterer, such as cutting the hands of the thief. All of this is left up to the Imams, and it continues. No one has the right to oppose them or tug the matter with them. This is from, again, the rights of the Imams and from their duties. It is a duty upon them to establish the hudud of Allah against the criminals that the Sharia court has ruled that they have been found guilty of the crimes they are accused of. And it is also their right, in the sense that no one has the right to exact these punishments in the absence of the execution of the Imam of these punishments. The only person that may execute these punishments is the Imam, or those that the Imam appoints in positions of government, enforcement agencies, and their likes. And if anyone tried to do this in the absence of authorization from the Imam, chaos would ensue. Chaos would ensue. People would start killing each other, and anarchy would spread in society. Everyone making a claim that I have evidence that this person deserves this particular punishment. This is not a game. This is not a joke. This is a very serious matter in which the blood of the Muslimin is involved, and as such, it has always been the habit of the Muslimin to leave this matter, as Allah Azza wa Jal designated, in the hands of the Imams. Nobody took these matters into their hands from amongst the Muslimin. It was always left up to the Imams of the Ummah. The second thing he mentioned is Qismatul Fay'. Al-Fay' is the spoils of war, the booty of war. And part of that Fay', specifically 20%, 1/5, is given by the Mujahideen once they gain some spoils from a battle. 20% is sent back to the central Muslim government. And in that case, the Imam has the right to distribute that wealth as he sees fit. No one has the right to object. No one has the right to tug this affair with him and oppose him in it. Then he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَدَفْعُ الصَّدَقَاتِ إِلَيْهِمْ جَائِزَةٌ نَافِذَةٌ مَنْ دَفَعَهَا إِلَيْهِمْ أَجْزَأَتْ عَنْهُ بَرًّا كَانَ أَوْ فَاجِرًا. And handing over the sadaqat to them, yani to the Imams, is both permissible, nafida, and fulfilling. The word fulfilling here means that it fulfills the duty of the Muslim to Allah. Whoever surrenders the sadaqat to them, it will fulfill his duty, righteous be he or wretched. Yani the Imam, it doesn't matter if he's righteous or wretched. If he sends someone to collect the zakat, surrender the zakat. Do not resist, do not object, and do not think or believe that your zakat has to be performed all over again because he is from the sinners, that Allah will not accept it from you. Some people make arguments. They say he's going to take it and spend it on himself. He's going to take it and go buy some luxury items. This zakah money will never reach the poor and the needy, never reach the categories that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has named in the Quran as the rightful recipients of a zakah. The actual owners of a zakah will never get it. So they make this kind of argument. Imam Ahmad is saying, that all of this is nonsense. Give the zakah to your leaders as Allah Azza wa Jal commanded. This is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would send men to collect the zakah from the Muslimin. And once you surrendered your zakah, your duty to Allah is done. Your duty to Allah is done. If they choose to sin thereafter, that's upon them. It's not upon you. You do your part. And do not be the person that causes chaos and anarchy to spread amongst the Muslimin. Now, the act of al-jibaya, it's called al-jibaya, the collection of az-zakah is common amongst those who have crops. So the rulers will send the collectors of zakah to those who have farmland. Likewise, those who have livestock. So again, the collectors of zakah will go to the owners of livestock to collect the zakah from them. But there are others who must also pay the zakah, and the rulers may have no clue that they also owe a zakat. And if the rulers have made no rules for you, they have no particular law addressing your case, there is no zakat agency that collects your zakah, but you know that you owe zakah based on the fiqh, based on the evidence that you owe it to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, then give your zakah anyways. Give it to any of the 8 categories that are named by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. An example of this, where in some countries a woman's gold is not considered money for a zakat. However, she has enough gold for it to have reached a nisab. And she has kept that gold for upwards of a year. And she owes a zakah to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala on that gold. And there is no government agency that is collecting money from women for their gold. In that case, she should take out the correct amount and give it out fi sabilillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala to any of the 8 categories that are mentioned in the Quran as the rightful and deserving recipients of az-zakat. And if it so happens that you are somewhere where the Muslim rulers have a mechanism in place where this type of wealth that owes a zakat is also being collected, then give it to them. Then follow the instructions that you have been given, follow the laws, and give it to them. And this will be considered fulfilling any of the duty that you owe to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Then he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, moving on to the next topic, also from the rights and duties of the Imam. وصلاة الجمعة خلفه خلف من والله جائزة باقية تامة ركعتين من أعادهما فهو مبتدع تارك للآثار مخالف للسنة ليس له من فضل الجمعة شيء إذا لم يرى الصلاة خلف الأئمة من كانوا برهم وفاجرهم فالسنة بأن يصلي معهم ركعتين ويدين بأنها تامة لا يكون في صدرك من ذلك شك. He said rahimahullah ta'ala, and praying Jumu'ah behind him meaning the Khalifa, the Emir, the commander of the believers, the leader. وَخَلْفَ مَنْ وَاللَّهُ, and behind whoever he appoints. So in many cases, the Muslim leaders will appoint a minister of Islamic affairs, for example, and he in turn will appoint imams for the masajid, and these imams will lead Salat al-Jumu'ah. So they are designated for this purpose by the leaders of the Muslimin, these imams. He said it is jaiza, permissible, baqiya, remains, yani until the day of judgment, tammatun rak'atayn, complete as 2 rak'ahs. It says a valid Jumu'ah. There's nothing that invalidates it. And whoever repeats it He is an innovator that has left the path of the narrations, the path of the athar. He is opposing the Sunnah. And Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, here is referring to a fact, and that is that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, although in many cases they were forced to pray behind tyrants and to pray behind leaders who have nothing on the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum in terms of righteousness and rank in the deen and understanding and fiqh. In fact, some of them were open sinners. During certain ages of the Ummah, the circumstances forced the Sahaba radiallahu anhum to find themselves being led, and somebody leading the Salah is completely displeasing to them with regards to their level of righteousness and their deen. In fact, in certain cases, people led the Salah that were hated by the Sahaba and looked down upon. But none of the Sahaba, not a single one, has ever said, this Salah is invalid and we need to repeat it. And this Jum'ah doesn't count. And we should go home and pray it as dhuhr, 4 rak'ahs, or anything of the sort. This is why Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, is saying he is opposing the narrations, because the narrations state the opposite. That they would count their prayers valid, and that the evil that the Imam is doing is on his books. And as for the Salah, then their Salah is valid. So whoever the Imam happens to be, and whoever they happen to appoint, you pray your Jum'ah, and you count your reward with Allah, tabarak wa ta'ala. Your Jum'ah is valid, it counts, and the 2 rak'ahs have fulfilled your duty, your obligation to attend al-Jum'ah. And as for their sins, they are upon them. He said, لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ فَضْلِ الْجُمُعَةِ شَيْءٍ. Whoever does this, he repeats al-Jum'ah, for example, or he deems it to be invalid and so on and so forth, he gets no reward for attending. Even if he attends and he prays, he gets nothing because of his creed, because of his belief system. So long as he does not see that the correct opinion is to pray behind the Imams, whoever they may be, the righteous and the wretched. The Sunnah is to pray with them 2 rak'ahs and to believe that they are complete. Let no doubt remain in your chest regarding this. Let no doubt remain in your chest regarding this. This is a matter you should deal with tranquility, with peace, with surety. From the rights of the Imam is to establish al-Jum'ah. This is not something that is up to the Muslimin to decide on their own whether they want to establish al-Jum'ah or not, and who they will appoint to lead the Jum'ah and so on and so forth. This is a matter that is in the domain of the leadership. It is the leadership of the Ummah that designates the khutaba, the preachers that will deliver the sermon, the Imams of al-Jum'ah. And likewise, it is their duty, it is their right, and it is their duty. Their right meaning no one can usurp that right from them and act in spite of them. And it is their duty, Allah Azza wa Jalla will question them about it. Rest assured that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask them about what He has placed upon their shoulders in terms of duties. All of these things Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala talked about here, as you can see, there's a common thread that touches upon all of them. That common thread is that in the absence of an Amir, in the absence of a leader for the Muslimin, all of these things would stop. When chaos ensues after a revolt, after a coup, after an attempt to overthrow the government, and we've seen this happen recently many times, enough to know how the playbook looks like and how it goes step by step. You notice that all these things stop. The collection of the zakah stops. So the poor and needy who used to receive these extremely, direly needed resources from the money of the wealthy are no longer receiving this. Additionally, the matter of jihad comes to a halt. In fact, the enemies of Islam look at the countries of the Muslimin as bared and naked countries, defenseless countries that are ripe for the picking. Forget about jihad and scaring off the enemies of Allah Ta'ala and appearing formidable, appearing powerful. On the contrary, they look at our countries as ripe for the picking. We appear to them in the form of sitting ducks. So this also comes to a halt, it stops. Likewise, the establishment of the hudud, the legislated punishments, to put an end to crime, to repel the criminals, to dissuade those who are still thinking about it and they're on the fence. Should they steal or should they not? Should they adulterate or should they not? Should they this or should they not? They're still on the fence. Once the government is overthrown or is hampered by consistent attempts to overthrow it, and they are busy fighting internal battles against the Khawarij and their types, then they don't have the time and the capacity to establish the hudud of Allah Ta'ala, and the result is crime spreads and criminals become encouraged and emboldened to act out their worst instincts and fulfill their most evil desires. Likewise, the issue of the distribution of al-fay', there is no fay'. When the Muslims are busy fighting inwardly amongst themselves, where is the fay' that is going to be distributed? There is no distribution of al-fay'. In fact, sometimes the masajid shut down and Salat al-Jumu'ah is no longer the weekly reminder that boosts the faith that the Muslimin need so that they can keep progressing in their deens, that is taken away. In fact, sometimes fear becomes the norm. People are afraid of stepping out of their apartments, their homes, because there are snipers sitting in the balconies waiting to pluck off someone's head just for fun, as was recently the case in certain Muslim countries. All of this, ya ikhwan, brothers and sisters, is a reminder of how valuable a gift it is from Allah Ta'ala to have a stable government despite its flaws, despite their mistakes, despite their sins. It is a tremendous blessing from Allah Azza wa Jal to have a righteous Muslim government. There is no doubt that is the highest and most desirable. But do not scoff at the ni'mah of Allah of having a Muslim government, even if it is not at the peak and pinnacle of righteousness that you are wishing for. Look around you, there is peace, there is safety. Look around you, there are rules that are still being followed. They may not be perfect, but there are still some rules. Look around you. You can take your bag and go to school. You can send your children to school. You can go to the masjid, attend Salat al-Jumu'ah. You can go to court and file a complaint against someone that is oppressing you, etc., etc. All of this comes to a stop when we allow the Khawarij to overtake and control the dialogue and push for the removal of government without offering us any kind of sensible alternative. They just think that by removing the government, the blessings of Allah will shower upon the Muslimin. And every time we follow them into that dark pit, we see that it is actually the exact opposite. We see the Muslimin suffer tremendously when we follow in their footsteps. And many of the benefits that we used to enjoy become things of the past, dreams of a bygone era. Nas'al Allah tabarak wa ta'ala al-huda wal-afiyah. Al-Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, after mentioning these examples of things that the Khawarij and their types, they want to oppose the Imam in, and that are the duties and the rights of the Imams of the Muslimin, he then goes back to the issue of al-khuruj. He said, وَمَنْ خَرَجَ عَلَى إِمَامٍ مِنْ أَئِمَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَقَدْ كَانَ النَّاسُ اجْتَمَعُوا عَلَيْهِ وأقروا له بالخلافة بأي وجه كان بالرضا أو بالغلبة فقد شق هذا الخارج عصى المسلمين. And whoever commits al-khuruj against any imam from the imams of the Muslimin after the people have united around him and submitted to his leadership in any way, in any fashion, whether it be by acceptance or by defeat, then this person who committed al-khuruj, he has splintered the cane of the Muslimin. This is an expression that is taken from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, splintering the cane of the Muslimin, as if when the Muslimin are united, they are a rod of wood that is strong, solid, useful. You can use it to defend yourself, to walk upon it. You use it for many, many useful purposes. However, when someone commits al-khuruj, they exit from the fold of the jama'ah, they have splintered, they have cracked the cane of the Muslimin. This is a very eloquent expression that shows the weakening effect that abandoning the unity of the Muslimin has on the ummah as a whole. When we lose a person, it is not just losing one. If they have committed khuruj, they have weakened the rest of us. And this is why it is a duty upon the Muslimin to fight the Khawarij at every level, to fight them intellectually, to fight them with evidence, and to fight them physically if they dare pick up arms and point them towards the Muslimin. Now, there are a number of details that pertain to this particular segment here, where Imam Ahmad talked about al-khuruj, and perhaps it makes more sense to save these for our next discussion. So inshallah we will conclude with this tonight. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. صلى الله وسلم وبارك وأنعم على عبده ونبيه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنبنا كله دقه وجله علانيته وسره. اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم به منا. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفة والغنى. اللهم إنا نسألك في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة والوقاية من عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نسألك العافية في ديننا ودنيانا وأهلينا وأموالنا. اللهم استر عوراتنا وآمن روعاتنا واحفظنا من بين أيدينا ومن خلفنا وعن أيماننا وعن شمائلنا ومن فوقنا، ونعوذ بعظمتك أن نغتال من تحتنا. اللهم بارك لنا في أوقاتنا، وبارك لنا في أعمارنا، وبارك لنا في أعمالنا، وبارك لنا في أوطاننا، وبارك لنا في ذرياتنا، وبارك لنا في أئمتنا وولاة أمورنا. اللهم بارك لنا في أموالنا، وبارك لنا في أهلنا، وبارك لنا في أزواجنا، وبارك لنا في أموالنا. اللهم بارك لنا وبارك علينا وامنن علينا ببركتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنا نسألك من الخير كله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم، ونعوذ بك من الشر كله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك وأنعم على عبدك ونبيك محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خيرا، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.